Hello, guys. This is Steve Nump calling in.
All right, please stand by, everybody. We'll be getting the meeting started very soon.
Cool.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure. Is the mic on?
It is.
Ready to go? All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the weekly CodeX meeting. This is Jameson Dempsey, residential fellow at CodeX. Today we have two great presentations from Smith AI and the Ontario Divorce Resource. But before we get into them, Susan, are there any announcements?
Sure. So we have a future law conference coming up and registration is open. So I encourage everybody to go to www.codexfuturelaw.com and check it out and hopefully register. And on March 6th, we have a speaker presentation by Ian McDougall, who is the GC of LexisNexis Legal and Professional. So that is on the event calendar, so at law.stanford.edu/events or on our CodeX website, and you can register there. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Great. So let's start with our first presentation from Smith.ai. We have Maddie Martin. Susan, is Maddie all set up?
She is. So Maddie, if you want to go ahead and get your slides going.
Yep, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my presentation now and go into presenting mode. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it here.
And you can hear me?
Yes.
Beautifully.
Okay, great. So Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for phone calls and web chat for solo and small firm attorneys. We've answered over 600,000 calls now, and we've been around since 2015. Really, for us, it's about combining real receptionists with machine intelligence, and we try to really complete work for attorneys so that they can focus more on practicing law and less on running a business. Firstly, yes, these are real receptionists. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the word virtual. Remote makes you feel really distant, but these are real people. This is Cheryl. And on web chat, we also have our same receptionist. And highlighting kind of an interesting thing here, Alex actually doesn't speak Spanish, but here she is speaking Spanish in chat. So one of the very interesting things that we do in leveraging the combination of real receptionists with artificial intelligence and kind of neural network AI is to allow for real-time translation, which is very handy for web chat. It's not necessarily coming into play yet with our phone receptionists, where we actually have Spanish-speaking people, but it allows us to have kind of 24/7 translation so that the person who's chatting on the website, if they speak Spanish, it's automatically translated to English, and then the English-speaking receptionist is automatically translated to Spanish for that person. And we are seeing that actually the website visitors are not aware of the fact that we are not native Spanish speakers when that's the case. So kind of an interesting example there. Just getting into kind of why we exist in the first place, we see that attorneys are getting interrupted on average 6 times a day. There's a really heavy refractoring period kind of for recovery, and that amounts to a significant loss. And at the same time, there's these interruptions that are coming through from potential clients who are basing their decision to hire mostly on the responsiveness to that first call or email. At the same time, even if you respond and you, let's say, schedule a consult, almost 60% of those people aren't even hiring the attorney after the consult. So there's a lot of kind of inefficiencies here. Speaking to another inefficiency is just the sheer loss in earnings that a lot of solo and small firm attorneys experience, they're, it's like 15% that they're actually not even capturing based on what they could be earning. So the dilemmas that we see are, these solo and small firm attorneys are spread really thin, and they have this dilemma between trying to minimize interruptions so that they can get work done, or sometimes they can't even be interrupted because they're in court, and maximizing their responsiveness to these potential clients who may be coming through a referral, but may also be coming through channels where they're actually paying to generate those phone calls and website visitors. So there's also a tech burden. If you're at a small firm, you don't have an IT staff. You also have the burden of trying to research and determine what software is best for you in your practice, as well as, adopting the skills for adoption, even if maybe you're using Zapier or you're trying to, plug in your systems to each other, not necessarily adopting brand new software, but at least connecting them. There's a heavy tech burden for the solo and small firm attorney, as well as, and this is not minor, kind of the control burden. So a lot of attorneys are in solo and small firms because they appreciate having the control over their practice and their work, but at some point that control needs to be released a little bit so that you can actually have work-life balance, and so that you can scale, and so that you're able to actually practice law and not spend all of your time running a business because it ends up kind of running you. So the issues are, low responsiveness, wasted time and energy. I mean, even for the leads who aren't converting, it's not a great experience to spend time with an attorney who you're not going to end up hiring. Missed revenue, poor work-life balance, and then what we find is that, lack of responsiveness is actually one of the chief reasons for bar complaints. So it's a big issue to have reviews on Google, wherever, various listing sites that don't feel accurate to your law practice, but happen to be a matter of your responsiveness. It's not necessarily accurate to how you perform as an attorney, but it does affect your business and how people, how interested people are to hire you. So Smith AI addresses this in a number of ways. We answer and return calls. We answer website chats. We can be passive or more active. We staff on extended business hours, so 6 a.m., 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. And then outside of those hours, we actually have a programmable, totally custom AI chatbot that you can use to customize your responses when the receptionists are not live staffing the chat. Going back to what we do in terms of actually completing work and not just answering calls, capturing and qualifying leads is something that people often use us for, and I explain this as like two branches to a tree. There are going to be good leads that qualify, and then there are going to be bad leads, and what we say oftentimes is to hand off that referral to other firms to us as well, so that you're not just saying like, oh, that's not our practice area, you called a family law attorney for a DUI case, but instead we recommend, Attorney Jane recommends this person, and you engender goodwill and, potentially earn a referral fee. But it's a way to kind of maximize that opportunity when you're communicating or when you outsource the communications. So kind of thinking through this in a really holistic way. We also can complete basic client intake. A lot of intake systems are now web hosted. There's access to a publicly accessible URL. We're not logging into any of these systems. So when we're scheduling appointments, it's a Calendly link, it's an Acuity link, whatever the case may be. And sometimes there's intake and payment built into that. But if there's not, we can also incorporate payments either inbound or outbound. So sometimes we will have clients who come to us and say, I need you to collect these payments. And it can be a really nice neutral third party that we provide to say, you probably don't want to talk to your clients about sensitive financial matters, and we can do that on your behalf, and many people use us for that. Now, we also integrate via API or with Zapier to your CRM, case or practice management systems, marketing automation systems like HubSpot, Salesforce, Infusionsoft, etc., as well as the calendar. Now, I've got a missing bullet there, but that's okay. So what makes us different? So a lot of receptionist services are, first of all, just answering calls. They are abroad. So they're being staffed by English speakers in the Philippines and elsewhere to drive costs down, which does, you know, it does result in lower quality and less kind of adherence to American norms and business practices, that when you're calling a solo or small firm attorney down your street or in your town, you're not really expecting to hear someone who doesn't really sound like they're familiar with the way the business is done in the US. There's just some kind of cultural nuances there that are important, especially to the legal industry and solo and small firms in particular. So combining people who are professionals and with customer service and hospitality backgrounds, as they're not college students, with really powerful machine learning and AI. So we can basically say, not only are you getting a good experience, because people who are calling attorneys may be in somewhat of a life crisis or not necessarily in the happiest state, they have high EQ as well as IQ, and then it's powered up sort of by the AI. So one example is that instant chat translation, where we're literally taking someone who only speaks English and empowering them to communicate more broadly with, for example, a Spanish speaker. But then also thinking about these efficiencies and accuracy gains that we can have through AI. So the example here is a zip code lookup. If someone calls and the attorney only practices in certain counties, let's say, then someone who doesn't know what county they're in, but they know their zip code, can say, oh, I'm in 14222, which happens to be my zip code in Buffalo, New York. The receptionist can plug that in, automatically see a green light that it's in the attorney's location, the correct area, and have kind of a natural, non-delayed response, instead of saying, oh, let me Google that for you, and with varying results. So kind of driving the efficiency, keeping the conversation going without any lag time, and keeping the receptionist focused on being a friendly person and not necessarily worried about the accuracy of the information because it's delivered to them. Another thing is really focused on completing work and not just being an answering service. We really try and take off as much from the attorney's plate as possible. We're not bookkeepers, we're not paralegals, we're not doing client conflict checks, but there is a lot actually that we can take over, and doing so on multiple channels. So not only inbound, but also outbound calls and website chat as well. Now, one of the interesting intersections here is that a lot of attorneys have contact forms on their website, and they have actually these emails that come through that are auto-forwarded to us so that we can call those people back automatically if they're not able to respond to those emails or they want that prompt response. So kind of cross-channel integration there as well. One of the other things is that we charge per call and not per minute, so it's predictable, and attorneys have told us that they like that feature. It's also a pretty low cost threshold. So if you start at $70 a month as we do, what we find is the solo and small firm attorneys who, especially the new ones out of law school that have a lot of debt potentially, they are using us for overflow calls only and not for all of their calls. So just preventing people from going to voicemail, which is helpful and a low cost, as well as free spam blocking. So if we look at kind of this conversion channel, the flow chart, all the things in bold are kind of areas that we touch. We're not in your email, we're not texting for you, but we are able to be responsive to phone and emails as you forward them to us, website chat, and real receptionists as well as bots, qualifying, capturing, and then helping with the conversion and responsiveness to these leads. So as I mentioned, inbound and outbound, but also the fact that the teams are distributed. So we're not dedicating receptionists, we're actually able through the software to present the information to all of the receptionists so they can sound like they're in-house without being pre-trained on certain specific accounts. So that allows us to kind of handle fluctuations in call volume. If an attorney, for example, kicks off a new marketing campaign, we don't need to say, hold up, we need to actually train someone in order to be up to speed in time for your campaign to launch. In terms of chat, it's really interesting if you think about being a gatekeeper or assisting in certain funnels that attorneys have embedded on their website. So for example, Justine Nickel, who is a criminal defense attorney in a solo practice in Colorado. She's got chat on her website. Importantly, she has the disclaimer on here to establish that it's not an attorney-client relationship, and it's also just someone who's not an attorney, because a lot of people come to sites for legal advice. And she's got this entire workflow of like, step one, fill out your basic information, an appointment with me. She's asking for a lot of information that may be confusing to people, or they may not know how much to share. Web chat kind of facilitates the flow of the information coming in, and for people completing that form and actually not getting bogged down in those tasks so that she can get those clients before they actually bounce from her website. And that is my very speedy run through of Smith AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maddie. Really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Maddie about the service, either on here in the room or online? Nothing so far. One thing, Maddie, that's we've been talking about it not only at CodeX but in the Legal Design Lab, where Jorge is sitting right next to me, works, is intake data and running analysis on it to figure out if there are certain trends in the sorts of questions that people are asking on the legal aid side. So I suppose one question that I have is, are you working with the pro bono side? Do you have pro bono plans to work with legal aid organizations? And do you allow larger scale analysis on the intake data that you have to recognize certain trends or themes or ways that people interact with lawyers in the legal system?
That's very interesting. Honestly, we haven't really gotten into that a lot, but we have a lot of partners who are. So when we are working with like Lead Docket and Lawmatics and Client Sherpa, a lot of those companies that are working deeply in intake solutions, they have a lot of that data. We don't record calls, and we don't kind of capture a lot of information on the actual, client data. So they would probably be a really good source of that information and anonymizing it. I mean, we know, Clio's producing reports. I think it's only a matter of time before a lot of these, companies are at the same time, since Clio just bought Lexicata, they're probably going to get a ton more data on the intake side of things and seeing that entire funnel from the initial contact to the completion. But we don't really get into that analysis. It would be a very interesting kind of exploration. One of the things that we do is just talk about as you're funneling people into these channels, as you're getting more people in, because attorneys are more and more branching outside of like the referrals, they need to be a lot more savvy than they've been. I think there's a lot of complacency that's not going to fly as attorneys get more savvy with marketing channels, and think that they are immune to response times because someone's going to wait for you to get back to them. It's just not the case anymore. So I would say the intake software companies are probably better suited to answer those analytical questions at this point.
Got it. And we have a question from Roland Vogel in the chat, which is, how does the AI work that you guys are using?
So the AI really comes into play with the smart routing and handling of the information that the receptionists are both presented with, and then also how we pass that information to the attorneys based on the software integrations that we have and their preferred communication methods. So one of the really cool things that we're doing is we are well, first of all, I mean, the spam blocking alone is very sophisticated, actually, because we have to do it on a global level and also on an account level, because some people want to hear from Google AdWords, for example, and others don't. So we're not going to block them holistically as a spammer, even though certain clients say they are. Now, one of the ways that we're actually using multi-channel communications and AI is to say, okay, you don't want us to actually ring your phone because you're in court and you can't pick up, or if you're in a meeting, we can actually use text messaging and Slack to notify you when a call is coming through and give you 30 seconds to pick up. Otherwise, we will answer. So there's kind of a lot of conditional logic that we've built in, as well as a lot of translation that we're kind of getting started with just with English Spanish, that I think web chat is going to show a lot of new opportunities that we're leveraging with AI. For example, with smart responses to basic questions or indications that someone has a question, the qualification and the next steps to proceed with them without even the receptionist's involvement, or maybe moving towards them monitoring rather than that initial response.
Scott asked a question in the chat, but why don't you ask in person?
Sure. Do you guys do SMS?
We don't do SMS except for notifications. So after every call or website chat, you can, or actually right now after every call, there's a call summary that happens that even if you got an appointment booked on your calendar, the receptionist will still write up what happened during that call, and that gets emailed or texted to you. It can also be passed into a Slack channel. You can also, with SMS, indicate your availability changes to us. So you can say, you can text away to your Smith AI dedicated number, and we'll know not to try and live transfer calls to you. And you can say away to 8, for example, for 2 hours, or for certain time periods, indicate don't transfer calls because you're in a doctor's appointment or you're at your kid's soccer game or whatever. So that allows us to be kind of immediately responsive to your availability without having to log into some dashboard.
Great. Question from Denis Ivanov in the Ukraine. How many languages are supported on Smith.ai?
So right now it's really English and Spanish, but as I mentioned, with the kind of neural network AI that we've built into the web chat, it's going to be greatly expanded. That is coming. We actually work with a lot of immigration attorneys who have requested Farsi and other languages that are really commonly encountered at their law firms. So immigration in particular, because we're already serving those clients, we want to be responsive to their potential clients and existing ones.
Sure. Great. Any other questions on the chat or here in the room? I guess that's it. All right. Thank you very much, Maddie. Really appreciate it.
Welcome. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Can you stop your screen share, Maddie?
Yes, I can.
Great. So let me, Zoom has taken over my screen here. Okay. Whoop. And Zoom has once again taken over my screen here. And here we go. Okay, great. So let's move on to our second presentation. We have Scott Allen and Catherine Hendricks from the Ontario Divorce Resource. So Scott and Catherine, I will turn it over to you. And if you could describe what is on your sweatshirts, and can we get one for Mike Genezareth here in the room?
I like that.
Lawyer and not a lawyer.
Oh, yeah. Which one am I supposed to get?
I think you did not. Maybe we'll get a computational lawyer.
Wannabe lawyer is what it is.
Yeah,
Wannabe lawyer, aspirational lawyer.
Right, exactly.
Very good. So guys, take it away. You got 20 minutes.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for having us, and always fun to visit Northern California. And it's
Yes, it's always nice weather here.
well, I
It's
mean,
blue skies right now, for the record.
literally, as we were taking off to come here, it started snowing after like 24 hours of snow or 20 hours of snow, and then we received word that right behind us they canceled most of the day.
Oh,
so,
jeez.
We're really happy to be here in the rain. Like,
Very
let it
good.
rain, let it rain, let it rain.
And the mic's over here to pick you guys up. So
Okay. Yeah, if people can't hear us, I guess just let us know.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we'll yell. So yeah, right. Hello. So Catherine, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hello world. I love that I've just learned that that's something very techie. I'm not a techie person, I'm a lawyer. And I've been practicing family law in Ontario 17 years, exclusively since 2006, called to the bar in 2002. And I have worked in family law and have been inspired and challenged by family law the entire time. Ontario has about a population of 14 million. And as you see, that's an important piece of data as we go through our deck. So I'll pass it back to Scott.
Cool. I'm an internet guy, an original internet guy. So the first company I was involved in was internet service provider, 1994-ish, let's say, maybe earlier. And since then, I've just been involved with a lot of companies, probably 9 exits, a bunch of technology, internet infrastructure, security, became a cell phone salesman for a while. So I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur. And then I met this lawyer, and this thing happened. So yeah, we have to also say Happy Valentine's Day.
That's right.
It's super appropriate that we're here on Valentine's Day.
And it's no coincidence, because the matters of the heart, intersection and law and family law and form process could create a lot of these dysfunctional Valentine hearts that are there on the screen. And also the current family law system, the process of it, generates a lot of negative energy in Ontario. The complexity of the forms themselves brings some negative energy. So we're here to promote love. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, so we're here on Love Day.
Love Day.
Talking about separation
And divorce. Yes. The hope and opportunity for love. So let's talk about what we're really talking about, which is a process of forms. And how this is happening in the world right now. Our idea is to systemize and simplify the process. And we're talking really specifically about the legal forms. The current iteration of our family law form is encompassing 75% of the use case in the family law issues. And so when we're talking about family law, we're always talking about separation. We're talking about divorce. We're talking about custody, access, children-related issues, support-related issues, and property issues.
So how did we come up with this idea?
We came up with this idea because of a complete systemic frustration in my mind. And what happened was I couldn't take the forms as they were, just my own self. I was agitated and irritated and upset most of the time, which is not a very nice place to be when you're with a lawyer. And this problem of forms and the rise of self-represented litigants has been a real issue and a real problem in our province, and it has gone worldwide as well.
And so you were asking people to help you fix this problem.
Absolutely. So I did sort of canvass around all of my contacts and all of my resources. After a while, I'm a big association practitioner, so I join all the associations and work in sort of the structures of how lawyers work. And this issue of forms just kept coming and coming and coming. And so I addressed them with all available channels that I had. Everybody had the same experiences as me, but there wasn't a way, there was no method, there was no way to change this. It was like, well, here they are, and this is what they've done, and the government has done a great job of putting out the forms, and there's a lot of information, but it was the how part of it. Like the why part was there. Obviously, we're in a separated and divorce system, but the how, like how do you do this in a way that doesn't make you want to, well,
go crazy.
Let's say that. Go crazy.
Cool.
So this is a stat: 45% of relationships fail. And that's a national number as well as an Ontario number. So I always say because I am an enthusiastic family law lawyer, everyone is a potential customer, right? And 1 in 2. If you go to a hockey game.
Jameson just got engaged.
Yes.
Okay, and we love love.
He's
We're here for love.
future.
But not in
every
Canada.
other person, look out the window. Every other person has experienced this, or their parents have experienced it. Look at a hockey game. I always go, need 'em, got 'em, need 'em, got 'em. And I'm not being facetious. Like this is a problem, and it's a problem of the heart, and then a problem of law. And so you're computing all of this, and 160 people, so 80,000 proceedings annually in Ontario. That's across all our jurisdictions. We have federal jurisdiction and provincial jurisdiction. And so one divorce or separation has 2 human beings in the relationship, and then sometimes they're very small human beings involved too. This is a slide, 65% elect to self-represent today. Self-representation has been on the rise since the early 2000s, and the self-representation issue has become a phenomenon in our court system. There are studies that we have done. That's what I'm supposed to say.
Well, no, I think, yeah.
The rise of a self-represented litigant is a human being experiencing divorce or separation who comes to court without counsel for whatever variety of reasons. So they step into the legal zone, because arena doesn't connote the right discussion, but the legal zone without any help.
And why the rise? Is there any sense? I mean, there could be a couple of reasons. One is it's more possible now. Another is it's too expensive to hire lawyers. Do you have any sense of the reason?
So there's lots of reasons, exactly those, and some of them are the expense and the cost, the complexity of the issue, the length of time to get resolution, the lack of legal information at the early days. And in the early days when this sort of phenomenon happened, the option, the way they fixed it was to do alternate dispute resolutions. So bringing in mediation, all those things. And that worked for a few years, but the process continued. And then what happened was access to information. Lots more clinics, a lot more pro bono, lots more in the courthouse support, mediation on site, all of these things. But it still requires a human to walk into a courtroom.
With some forms.
With some forms. So I love forms. I love
She really does.
I really do. Complete answers. I love check boxes. And I think a lot of people like those things because it brings order to what you're doing. And what our province has done is created a whole series of forms based on the rules, family law rules. So Form 8, and would you look at this here? And I also even like my own sentence, the process for initiating a litigation requires the understanding of what court forms are used to, right? Instead of just saying, here's the forms. So we start a family law file with an application if we're in a litigation process. And the forms are
There's five forms there, all with a bunch of redundant information. And knowing this combination of forms is not something that you're naturally born with. It's probably something you can find online, but then you're like, am I the applicant or the respondent? I mean, even that's really basic. Maybe some people wouldn't know what's going on in this stressful time of their life. And then if you get into any sort of complexity, you're going to have like these really wild form combinations that are really difficult to navigate. And this is a look at what one of the forms sort of looks like as a design person, or hey, you can see it's not super well designed, maybe. This is another one. And so you just get this wall of words, and some of it applies to you, some of it doesn't. And you might be a little bit stressed out because you might have your children or your money or your house or your heart or all of the above involved in completing this form successfully. These are some images from the guide that the ministry puts out. So this is their really, and it's an attempt, right? And they are trying to help, the self-help guide. This is the index, so it's got 14 pages. So you're getting divorced, and you get this wall of text of 14 pages, where it's like a legal brief. And even if you're an educated dentist, you read this, and you're like, my God, like I'd rather just kill myself. Why don't I just kill myself right now, as opposed to spend an hour reading this and trying to understand it, right?
So this slide was my sort of attempt to explain just simply how things can go wrong quickly, and wrongs at all various stages of the whole process.
From real life experience.
From real life experience, yes. So I have lots of real life experience with self-represented litigants, and I do sit as a dispute resolution officer of the Superior Court of Ontario. So I do get hands-on forms actually in practice.
So Catherine volunteers at the court, and these self-reps come in, and she's there to help them.
Exactly.
And she sees all of the errors they make with the forms. And sometimes it's a very simple error. Sometimes it's completely wrong forms.
Yeah.
But regardless, it means a large waste of time for the court and a large waste of time for the applicant or respondent, and all of that. So yeah, these are just some of the issues.
It's micro, macro, right? That's the thing.
Yeah. Maybe at the end, if we have time, you can tell some good stories.
Sure.
So we wanted to make it usable, to take this really difficult to use process and make it usable. So we came up with this service. It's online, and this is where it's currently at today in beta. And if we click on Get Started, we took the approach of asking one question at a time. So the first question you'll get is this one. I had actually wanted to make the first question, what's your favorite color? And then have the site just change to that color, but that got voted down by the lawyers. So the first question is, what are you here for today? One of the interesting things that we've done is we really tried to keep walls of text off the screens. So we have this, what I call like a release valve, this I'm not sure or none of the above. And most of the questions will have that.
Yes.
So if you click on that, then you get more text. Okay, so if you're like, if the context doesn't make sense to you, or if there's a lot more to tell you about something, we have this escape valve for people who need it. But otherwise, if you're capable of understanding the question, we want to really keep the footprint on your conscience, on your mind, quite light in terms of the amount of words we show you. So these are the sorts of questions that we'll ask you as we sort of try to determine what your situation is and what forms you're going to need. Do you have children is always kind of a big determining factor. And so as we go through those questions, we'll determine what forms you need and what data we need to collect for those forms. Another thing we've built into the service, because during our testing, we recognized that people would start filling them out and then life would interrupt them. So before, we haven't even signed up yet, and we've kept track of your answers. So when you come back, it says, hey, do you want to pick up where you were? And it's kind of an important feature. So people get started and get going, and we really try and keep it lightweight, light touch, high security, high privacy. But we sort of built in this mechanism that when you come back, we're like, hey, you were here before. Do you want to just pick up from where you were, as opposed to resetting all your data?
And I think that also speaks to the emotional side of family law. When you're in these forums and asking these questions related to your kids and related to your spouse and your beloved, and it's just the emotion overwhelms you, and rather than shut down the whole thing, this is a stop point.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. This sounds facetious, but it's not. There's a reason I'm asking this question. What happens the second time you're here, coming into the service the second time? Not with the same divorce, the next divorce.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does it?
Well, you'd have an account then. So this is all pre-account set up.
Account name. That's all.
No. The account will actually support more than one proceeding.
Okay.
We haven't gotten there. We're not even close to that. We're not even close to that. This is before the user signs up, actually. So I haven't provided any information. I've just answered some situational questions.
Yeah.
So we don't know who you are. We don't know your name. We don't know your email address. This is all before that. And this is just a nice little feature that we built so that people wouldn't have to go through it 2 or 3 times. They could just pick up right where they were. So you're setting up with an account now. Once we've got what we call the prescription of forms based on your situation, we say, all right, give us an email address, because you're going to start giving us information that we're going to want to secure, using a password. Because up to now, it's been all sort of generic situational information. We're going to get personal now. So we get your email address and collect the data. And we collect it once. So common to the forms is a lot of information like lawyers and contact information, kids' names, ages, birth dates, separation dates, all this information. And we collect it once and then put it into the right forms. So you're not, if you're going through this naturally, you might have to write your name 200 times. Here you just type your name once.
That's an exaggerated number, but yes, a lot of times.
Well, I've never been known to exaggerate. We also have some signposts and sort of banners within the application, recognizing that people will be stressed out. So we're like, congratulations, you're making great progress. We're going to put more of this type of stuff in. Really, we've just been seeing how long the process is for common use cases and finding how people are using it so that we can put in, as I like to say, manatees and emojis to sort of encourage people to, get through the process. So we've developed a bunch of interesting little technology hacks to make the process of separating simpler. And so Catherine had told us that it's very common that she ends up with pieces of paper that look like this. And maybe you can, what is this?
So this is a schedule, a parenting schedule, sharing time between mom and dad. And
this is an actual one too,
This
right?
is an actual one, yeah. And so we usually do calendars like this if we're in front of our computer electronically, but if we're often in court or in settlement meetings or in DROs, and we're trying to put a figurative representation of what the schedule is going to look like, people will get very confused when you use this in language or use it in writing. And so there's just so many aspects of this. And in this case, we did the whole year and the markers ran out. And so I was maybe complaining about that scenario.
So it's 2019 and we're using markers on paper. So we developed an access schedule that does the exact same thing by week, by month, bi-weekly, considering we can preload holidays by nationality or cultural preference. And we can specify pickup points and drop-off times and exceptions, and we can have multiple children with multiple schedules, and it's all sort of point and click, and then boom, goes into your forms, and then can be accessed at any time by someone to be able to see what day it is and where the kids are supposed to be. This is editing common information. So after you've given, let's say you changed lawyers, you update your information in one place, and then all your forms and your future forms are updated, so you don't have to worry about redoing things if you move, which is very common. Addresses change a lot during this process. We have digital signature, which is nothing too fancy, but of course it's a requirement. You can also fax documents that are completed forms to your attorney or to the court or to yourself if you want, I guess, if you like faxes. But so we've built in the ability to fax the completed documents. We've also built in this, what are these called again? Not terms.
Custody options?
This is the terms of custody, so it's like the spousal, like what are these called? This is terrible.
With the access schedule.
Well, no, but this is there's a name for it. The claims. This is a claims wizard. Thank you.
Okay.
Myself. So you have all these claims that you make as part of your application or your response. And so custody and all these different things will have claims. And so we have claims wizards that sort of allow you to build your claim and then translate it into language that's acceptable by the court. So we give options that are commonly used, and then you select that, and that translates it into natural language.
And these are all standardized.
These are all standardized.
And these are all produced and distributed by the Ontario government. So what we've done is translated those.
We've used theirs. We've used what the government provides to people, but in paper, and put it online. So managing the process, as you're going through the divorce process and the form filling out, you'll see this is a very common sort of, this is our dashboard. So you can see this person has finished 17% of their confirmation of assignment. They finished their Form 8, they've got a check mark there. They can download, edit, or fax that. And they still have 3 supporting forms to get started on and to complete this part of the process. So we've got this.
How did you get to the dashboard? Sorry, I missed it. I was like, not.
Oh, it's on. It's well, I'm just. These are screenshots.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but there was some place on the.
Yeah, it's a menu. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can give you access later. So yeah, this is sort of the dashboard that sort of tells you where you're at and what you need to do. We definitely want to infect it with more positive messages and sort of gamify divorce a bit if you can, or gamify form completion. You know, incent you to you know, to feel good about this as opposed to bad. There's the fax button. We also have live chat on the site. So just quickly some numbers. You know, I always like to be number based. So we know that there are 160,000 divorce and motions filed annually in Ontario.
There's 80, but there's 2.
80 with 2, yes, with two people, sorry. And then the 50% of those are SRLs, and that's going up. Like those are SRLs using these forms. There's an online tool that I can see that going to 90. And then the percentage of SRLs with issues. So KH as a DRO experiences it. It's more like 95% of them have a problem that sends them home or basically causes them to lose a key part of their claim. So we used 80 as an assumption to get us to 64,000 forms annually with issues. Then we just took some rough costs, our judge at 150, clerk 23, a service officer 23.
Those are hourly.
Hourly costs. And then we said all the other stuff like the buildings and the electricity and the security and the water and whatever, health insurance, we're just going to we'll put 0 for that. And we'll say it's 196 in just the human costs, and we'll say 1 hour is wasted for incomplete forms. So that's $12.5 million a year of wasted energy. You could make this 2 hours per form, and it gets to 24 million and include other costs. You could make it half an hour and it's 6 million. It's still a reasonable number. More importantly, looking at the self-reps and how this impacts them. So a conservative estimate of how long it takes someone to fill out these forms properly is about 12 hours from knowing nothing to getting it done almost right or right. In our initial testing, we're going to save you about 10 hours of that process. And we've sort of valued an SLR's hour at $50,000 a year. The median income for the province is actually $73,000. So again, we're just using very conservative numbers. And that gets us to $16 million in time saved. And again, we're not even talking about legal fees or what people might pay people to do this. So this is my favorite slide, which is the wait what slide. I think I'll do the spreadsheet analogy. So when we talk to lawyers about this, they're quite often afraid about what this means to their practice because they make a lot of money filling out forms for people. You know, you can charge $3,000 easily to fill out the forms. To assess, sit down, listen, fill out the forms perfectly. You can charge probably twice, 3 times that, to be honest. And so it's scary to lawyers. Just like it was scary to accountants in 1984 when Lotus 123 came out and they thought, oh my God, the sky's gonna fall, everyone's gonna do their own taxes. What really happened is that everyone showed up with their books, with their spreadsheets, with the numbers in it, and then the accountants could easily work with those and just give advice. So instead of having 5 customers a month, they could have 50 because all of the grunt work, the bureaucracy, the data was coming to them in a way that was formatted that enabled them to do the high level work, the consulting, the strategic thinking, the advice at a greater frequency. And so we see a real direct analogy between accounting in the 1980s and the legal profession in the 2000s and noughts. And so that is, and I've been involved with legal hackers, which Jameson's also involved in for probably 5 years now, and sort of watched legal tech come from along the continuum of like unacceptable, no way, to maybe we should use a little bit of this to like, oh my God, it's going to consume the world. And I really think we're about at that tipping point.
The other aspect of this is the self-represented litigant who doesn't have a lawyer, right? So the impact to lawyers may be somewhere out there, but what we're trying to do is access those self-represented litigants and put some tools into their hands. And lawyers at this point in time aren't able to capture those dollars because those dollars are less than what their retainer would be or what their legal hour would be. So in a sense, it's a tool for both lawyers and for self-represented litigants. And there's also another class of unrepresented litigants, which is a very different thing. And so the idea is that what we're trying to do is have access to justice.
Mm-hmm. Terrific.
Another question we often get, like the wait what, is legal advice, right? You guys your website's not giving legal advice, which everybody in this room is probably super familiar with. But a lot of lawyers we talk to aren't. And, we give facts, we state facts. That's not advice. Advice is an opinion, which we do not do.
Right.
We don't do opinion, we do facts. And so that's how we get around, not even get around, that's how we comply with that sort of issue. So routes to market, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm sensitive to time, but we're looking at all 3 routes to market, direct to end users through lawyers, which is probably not that likely because lawyers are resistant to change and not very, just where it's just reality today. We are talking to some justice systems about perhaps licensing the technology directly to them because that would be the best way. Because then they make the rules and own the system, and there's no middle.
The implementation of it is.
So where we're at, so we're launching our beta imminently. We cover about 65% of use cases today. And we take out some of the harder ones. The harder. Absolutely. Yeah. Form 15 is one where you've already have a divorce or separation agreement, and you want to make a change, and it's really tough. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be dusting off the final 90% of use cases that we're going to cover. The last 10% we're actually not even going to get to because they're really so obtuse. They're like special. They're
really so special. So we're talking about things. Well, no. We're talking about restraining orders, right? This is not use case. We're talking about protection, child protection, and the most vulnerable. Those things. And my hope and my desire and my intent is that all of those resources that are going to the not easy. Divorce is not easy, but all of those the standard ones, right? All of those resources can be redirected to where it's needed. Yeah. Where it's needed. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we'll be at 90% in about 2 weeks. We're building out our marketing plans. We're growing our team advisory board. I think we have 3 or 4 people that are joining us actively right now. And we're sort of exploring our funding options. Up to now, it's been self-funded, which has been wonderful, but is not going to work going forward, or maybe it does. And then where we're going. So we decided to use Ontario because Catherine knows it like the back of her hand, and I live there. But we are definitely going to America, or coming to America, like Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
And California and New York are our first 2 markets. We reckon, I mean, we built it as a scalable platform with this in mind. So we're 3 to 5 months away from any market. And a lot of that is just legal consultation and procedural tying up. And then, of course, we're looking at other types of law. So probate, we have actually done a version for probate in Ontario. We're interested in small claims and other areas. And so that is it with 8 minutes left. We thank you all for giving us your hearts and minds on Valentine's Day. And I guess we will see if there are any questions about love.
Any question? Welcome to the legal love line.
That's right. Exactly. Come on.
Are there any? Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. So I'll start in the room. Does anyone in the room have any questions for Scott and Catherine?
Have you seen like lawyers who use your application?
Well, yes,
Because
we
it's
work a
much
lot with
easier.
lawyers, and so we're not thinking our route to market is through lawyers or law firms because it's just too hard of a sell. It's much easier to give it away for free to end users and have them show up at lawyers with forms completed, and then the lawyers will be like, wait, where'd you get these forms? And like, it's just the lawyers don't really have an incentive, and they're resistant to change. And,
Those
you
are
know,
very blanket statements. Let's say this.
Generally.
We have used lawyers all the way along, family law lawyers and like-minded lawyers and.
We
lawyers
use them to develop the
Absolutely,
service, but
yeah.
like in order to get to market, like actually more lawyers have looked at this than
non-lawyers.
than non-lawyers for sure.
Yeah.
But like in getting to market, like selling to a law firm, that would be a very long time to get the sort of market penetration we want.
And
So
we have 65% of self-represented litigants who
Yeah.
need these forms.
so we might as well just get it to them.
Have you talked with anybody in adjacent spaces, I think specifically support pay? And you know support pay or not?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, they kind of.
We haven't talked to, there's a
related.
lot of people that we've intentionally not spoken to because
Yeah.
until we have something, it doesn't matter, right? And so now that we have something, what we consider something,
Yeah.
we can have those conversations. And, you know, we're absolutely into partnering and allying and, you know, we're
Absolutely.
not, you know, we're pro love.
Yeah, I was just kind of interested in the way of how they entered in.
Yeah, there's a million businesses in this business, right? Like there's a million little ways to monetize it. And so I'm not worried about the monetization of it, to be honest. And so we either partner or we haven't decided beyond this where we're going and how we're doing it. We talk strategically about giving it away for free, just doing it for free for Ontario forever.
Yeah.
Certainly to start, just to get people to use it, and then there's other ways that we can monetize it later.
I don't
Yeah,
like that.
Sure.
but we may also charge $100 at some point. We can
Figure it
maybe
out.
charge $20. We
I think
may.
monetization is only half the story, it does have abstraction, you give it away for free and nobody uses it. So you still have to get
That's
people
right.
to know about it and start to
Yep,
use it, you have
yep.
to develop that virality and ask
Absolutely.
some questions, how do you get it out there?
Sure.
And so you need money often to do that.
Yes.
Which is why they do get connected, but actually monetization is obviously important for you, but it's a separate issue from crime.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
What's the ideal state? Is the ideal state a free open platform that?
Justice system, but license it from us. That'd be the best.
Yeah, so justice system licenses it and then offers it for free to.
Yeah.
In all of the.
users.
Yeah, and so they save the
And
money. They
users.
justify it by saving the money, and they own it roughly, basically, so that there's a mistake, it doesn't matter. It's their
Yeah.
mistake. You know.
How do you update it with any changes in law that come about, if changes in law?
Well, if it
Oh,
does,
yeah.
it doesn't. The law doesn't change that often.
Well, practice directions change and form changes. There's always updates and edits. Those come through the Superior Court of Justice and Ontario Court of Justice. The AG, the Attorney General pushes all those down, and they're usually filtered in.
So like what I'm used to in terms of like dealing with API changes, let's say, this is like 4 times a year, maybe something changes small, right? I'm used to like every 2 weeks, a lot changes. So it's not technically not a challenge.
Yeah, but you could give, like, if the government is licensing it from, or court is licensing it from you, they could just make changes.
Yeah,
to that on the-
absolutely.
Or make it part of the process.
Yeah.
or something.
We would hope that would happen. I mean, to be honest, like if you're getting esoteric about it, we are taking kind of a very complicated system and making it a lot easier by bringing it online. But the next step would be like, actually, why do we even do have this? Like, let's get rid of whole sections of this. But that's way down the road.
Got it. So we have some questions. Any other questions in the room? No. Okay, great. So we have some questions online. You addressed privacy and customer information. The next question, this is from Denzel, is will AI come into play with what you're doing at any point?
So, I mean, AI to me is always, it's like blockchain for me 3 years ago. AI is being such a buzzword, and everything has to have AI, right? And what is AI? Well, in everything, to be honest. What is AI? So I know a lot about AI. I've worked with it for a long time. I've worked with it since it was called heuristics, before it was a sort of buzzy word. And sorry to be sort of like that reactionary, but it just, like, a lot of things get called AI. You can call anything AI. Like, what is AI? It's a rule set, right? And it's how big is that rule set and how much rigor is applied against it, right? So you could argue, if you're being obtuse, that all of computer programming is AI, right? It's all if-thens, it's all rules. And so, but AI, or heuristics, as I like to think about it, applied to this in particular, I think, you look at the logic puzzle that we unwound to take all of the situations to get different form prescriptions I mean, I could argue that that's AI, but like, so for example, I don't know, I hold a high standard to call something AI, and I haven't even thought about that high level of rigor.
Sure.
If you're not applying like 6 to 60 gigabytes worth of rules against something, to me, it's not AI. It's a computer program.
The mic is turning red.
I'm fine. I'm an AIer from a long time ago, and the rules side, but unfortunately, AI doesn't mean rules anymore. It means machine learning.
Right. Well, which is a machine making the rules, inferring the rules, testing the rules. Yeah. So it's
well, not even necessarily making any rules these days. You just use
Sure.
learning, and you can derive an answer.
I was simplifying.
Predictive analytics, it does on a case-specific basis. It doesn't even generate any rules.
Okay.
So
different conversation.
So that's why I could turn red with AI, because it doesn't really mean what it was. Apparently, I'm no longer an AI, is what I've discovered. I didn't change it.
So there's more agreement in the room then.
Look, we're all in a virtual reality right now.
This is a simulation. All right, so let's go back to Denis Ivanov from Ukraine. A year ago in Ukraine, they launched a divorce chatbot in Facebook Messenger called Pseudobot. So if you guys need any information, outcomes, results from a different context,
Thank you.
happy to put you in touch with the developers and the co-founders
Oh, cool. Yeah.
doing
that's
that.
awesome.
And you can reach Denis.
Yeah, Dennis and I have talked
Yeah.
Okay.
in the past.
Great. And then next we have Mark Lauritsen, who has a question. Says he's working on a similar project for Washington State using plain language forms and Law Help Interactive as service as we speak. So as we're all here.
Wow.
Do you mind nonprofits looking at your site for design ideas if they're doing it in a different
no.
context?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, Mark.
You do not mind.
Please, yeah.
No, he
Please
doesn't.
reach out directly, and we'll share everything we know.
Okay, terrific. Mark says great. So Mark, you can email me, just jameson@law.stanford.edu, or you can get Scott's email up here and make a connection. Any other questions for Scott and Catherine? All right, with 1 minute to spare, thank you guys all so much for coming. One more round of applause for our presenters. And Susan, what's next?
Next week, we have a special presentation from Austria, from Salzburg, I think, from the IRIS 2019 conference. So tune in for that next week.
Very nice. All right, thank you all very much for coming, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You guys.
All right.